The knock at my bedroom door came just as I was about to turn off the lamp and call it a night. It was soft, hesitant, the kind of knock that carried uncertainty with it, as if whoever stood on the other side wasn't sure they should be there at all. Then came a voice I knew well, though I had never heard it sound quite like that before. Oliver? It was Harriet. My best friend Nathan's older sister. I sat upright immediately, startled enough that my book slipped from my hands and landed on the floor with a dull thud. Harriet had never come to my room before, not in all the years I'd spent half my life at the Bennett house. She was 24 to my 19, calm where Nathan was reckless, thoughtful where he was loud. She'd always been kind to me, in the easy, older sister way that made her feel both familiar and unreachable at once. And now she was standing at my bedroom door. "Can I come in?" she asked. Her voice trembled. "We need to talk." Something about the way she said it tightened my chest. I swallowed and cleared my throat. "Yeah. Of course." The door opened slowly, and Harriet stepped inside. The hallway light framed her for a moment before she quietly shut the door behind her. She was still dressed from the family dinner downstairs, a pale blue cardigan over a white blouse, her auburn hair tied back loosely. But her usual neatness had slipped. Strands of hair had fallen around her face, and her expression was strained in a way I'd never seen before. She didn't sit. She just stood there, twisting her hands together. I stood too, suddenly unsure what to do. "What's wrong?" I asked. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she looked at me, and I realized her eyes were shining with tears she was trying desperately not to let fall. I didn't know where else to go. The words landed heavily between us. Without thinking, I pulled my desk chair toward her. "Sit down." She hesitated, then obeyed. I sat on the edge of my bed across from her, waiting. Harriet took a shaky breath. "Tonight, at dinner, when Mum and Dad were talking about the church fundraiser next month." I nodded. Everyone had been discussing plans, laughing over who would organize what. Harriet had been unusually quiet, but I'd assumed she was tired from work. "They announced something I didn't know they were going to announce," she said. I frowned. "What?" Her mouth trembled. "They told everyone I'd accepted Daniel's proposal." I stared at her. Daniel Foster. The assistant pastor's son. Perfectly respectable. Perfectly polite. Universally admired. And Harriet had always looked miserable around him. "What?" I said. "But, you're not engaged." "No." The word cracked. I leaned forward. "Then why would they say that?" Her shoulders sagged, as though she'd been carrying a weight too heavy for too long. "Because they arranged it months ago," she whispered. "And they assumed eventually I'd say yes." I blinked. The Bennetts were deeply traditional, but this was something else entirely. "They can't do that. They think they're helping me." Her voice was hollow. "They think Daniel is stable and dependable and good for me. They think because he comes from the right family and attends the right church and has the right future planned, I should be grateful." "And what do you want?" Her eyes met mine. And for the first time I saw not Nathan's composed older sister, not the capable primary school teacher everyone admired, but a frightened young woman who felt trapped. "I want my own life." The words came out broken. I didn't know what to say. So I said the only honest thing I could. "Then you deserve it." Something in her expression shifted. Not relief exactly, but recognition, like she'd been waiting for someone, anyone, to say those words aloud. "I thought if I said no, I'd disappoint everyone," she whispered. "Mum. Dad. The church. Daniel's family. Everyone. You're not responsible for everyone's expectations." Her laugh was small and bitter. "That's easy for you to say." "Why?" "Because you've always known who you are." I almost smiled at that. If only she knew how often I felt uncertain. But perhaps certainty wasn't the point. "I just know this," I said carefully. You shouldn't spend your life making yourself miserable so other people stay comfortable. That did it. A tear slipped down her cheek. Then another. And suddenly Harriet was crying in earnest, years of held-back fear spilling over all at once. I crossed the room without thinking and crouched beside her chair. Hey. She covered her face. I'm sorry, she said through tears. Don't apologize. I never cry. Then maybe you needed to. For a while, neither of us spoke. I simply stayed there while she cried, because sometimes kindness isn't fixing someone's pain, it's refusing to leave while they feel it. Eventually her breathing steadied. She lowered her hands, embarrassed. You must think I'm ridiculous. Not even slightly. She gave a weak smile. Then she surprised me. When did you get so wise, Oliver Hayes? I laughed softly. I'm not wise. You are. No, I hesitated. What? I looked down at my hands. When Mom left, Dad spent years pretending he was fine so I wouldn't worry. He smiled through everything. Told me he was happy. And one day he finally admitted he'd been lonely and angry and lost the whole time. Harriet listened quietly. He said pretending to be who people needed him to be nearly broke him. And if he could teach me one thing, it was never to build a life around someone else's expectations. The room was still. Then Harriet whispered, That's exactly what I've been doing. I nodded. You can stop. She looked at me for a long time. Then she said, Will you come with me tomorrow? To do what? To tell them. I blinked. Your parents? She nodded. I don't think I can do it alone. I was 19. Harriet was older, wiser, infinitely more composed than me, or so I'd always thought. Yet in that moment she looked at me with fragile hope, and I understood that courage often arrives looking exactly like fear. Of course, I said. Her shoulders loosened for the first time. Thank you. The next morning felt unnaturally bright. Harriet barely touched breakfast. Nathan, oblivious, chatted about football scores while Mr. and Mrs. Bennet discussed fundraiser logistics. Then Harriet set down her fork. Mum. Dad. I need to say something. The room quieted. Her hands trembled under the table, but I gave a small nod from beside her. She drew breath. I'm not marrying Daniel. Silence. Mrs. Bennet blinked as if she hadn't heard properly. What? I never agreed to marry him, Harriet said, stronger now. And I'm not going to. Mr. Bennet's expression darkened. Harriet, don't be dramatic. I'm not being dramatic. I'm being honest. Nathan looked between them, baffled. Wait, what? Her mother recovered first. Darling, everyone was so pleased. Daniel is wonderful. He is, Harriet said. But I do not love him. And I won't marry someone simply because it pleases everyone else. Her father's jaw tightened. This is irresponsible. No, she said, and her voice rang clear enough to startle even herself. It's responsible. It would be irresponsible to promise a life I cannot honestly give. No one spoke. Then Mr. Bennet looked at me. And suddenly I felt very 19 indeed. You knew about this? I met his gaze. She told me last night. And you encouraged this? Harriet straightened before I could answer. No. He reminded me that my life is mine to choose. Her father looked as if he might argue. But then something unexpected happened. Nathan stood. Well, obviously. Everyone turned to him. He frowned. She shouldn't marry someone she doesn't love. Why is this even a discussion? Harriet stared. Nathan shrugged awkwardly. You're my sister, Harry. Not community property. A startled laugh escaped her. Mrs. Bennet looked between her children, uncertainty softening her face. Then slowly, she sighed. Why didn't you tell us sooner? Harriet's voice shook. Because I thought disappointing you meant losing your love. Her mother's eyes filled instantly. Oh, sweetheart. She crossed the room and knelt beside Harriet, taking her hands. You could never lose our love. Mr. Bennet remained still for a long moment. Then his sternness cracked. And suddenly he looked not imposing but tired. I thought I was protecting your future, he said quietly. I know, Harriet whispered. His shoulders lowered. But I forgot it was your future. The apology in those words changed everything. Harriet burst into tears again, and this time her mother held her while Nathan awkwardly patted her shoulder and Mr. Bennet rested a trembling hand on her back. I slipped quietly from the room, knowing this moment belonged to them. I stepped into the garden and sat beneath the old oak tree where Nathan and I had spent half our childhood building crooked forts and impossible dreams. A few minutes later, footsteps approached. Harriet sat beside me. Her eyes were red, but her face was lighter than I had ever seen it. They're not angry, she said, sounding amazed. Families usually aren't as fragile as fear makes them seem. She smiled. You really are wise. I laughed. Still not wise. She studied me. Then her expression grew thoughtful. There's something else. What? She looked down at her hands. I was offered a teaching position in Christchurch last month. My chest tightened. New Zealand? She nodded. It's everything I've wanted. Independent school. Literature program. Creative freedom. She hesitated. I turned it down because of Daniel. I looked at her. And suddenly understood. You're going. A smile spread slowly across her face. Yes. The joy in that single word was brighter than the morning itself. That's incredible. Her eyes shone. I think so too. Then she looked at me with a strange softness. You helped give this back to me. No, I said gently. You gave it to yourself. I just reminded you it was there. She leaned her head briefly against my shoulder. Still. Thank you. A month later, the whole family drove Harriet to the airport. Even Mr. Bennet cried, though he insisted it was hay fever. Nathan hugged her so fiercely she laughed and called him ridiculous. And when my turn came, Harriet held me for a long moment. Promise me something, she said. Anything. When life starts telling you who to be, don't listen. I smiled. I won't. She stepped back, then reached into her bag and handed me a book. My worn favorite novel, which I'd lent her years ago and forgotten about. Inside the cover she'd written. Thank you for reminding me that courage begins with truth. May your own truth always lead you home. I looked up, but she was already walking toward security, sunlight catching her auburn hair like fire. She turned once and waved. Then she was gone. Life moved forward, as it always does. Nathan and I started university that autumn. Mr. and Mrs. Bennet relaxed into a gentler kind of parenting. Postcards arrived from Christchurch filled with stories of bright students and seaside cafes and the thrilling terror of building a life from scratch. Harriet sounded happier with every letter. And whenever doubt crept into my own choices, as it inevitably did, I opened that book and read her words again. Courage begins with truth. Years later, I would understand fully what she taught me that night at my bedroom door. That the bravest conversations often begin with trembling voices. That kindness can change the course of a life. And that sometimes hope arrives not as a grand miracle, but as a quiet knock, a simple question, and the courage to answer. Yes. Come in.